Hey guys, Coach Mike Ryan here from the Fastball USA Training Center, and welcome to part 4 of our 7-part arm health series. In part 4, today we're going to discuss the topic is the importance of recovery. So let me explain what I'm talking about when I say recovery, and I want you to think about how recovery is impacting your performance. So simply put, let's just start with, say, day 1. Day 1, your kid pitches. It could be opening day or whatever it is. Day 1, he's pitching, and he looks really, really good, okay? And you're like, okay, his velocity is about where we expect it to be. His command's pretty good. Breaking ball's pretty good. Now, he gets, let's just say, 4 or 5 days rest in between. He comes back out the following week, and you notice he pitches pretty good, but what you start to notice is velocity was down a little bit. His command maybe just not quite as good. Breaking ball was okay. Now, and this is just an example, now he gets another 4, 5, 6 days in between, goes out to pitch again. Now you start to see a bigger decrease in velocity. Maybe the arm starts to bother him. Maybe his command is at its worst out of the 3 starts. And, of course, breaking ball isn't good. So what you're starting to see is a decrease in performance and velocity and command, movement, breaking ball after each consecutive start. Now, I'm just giving you one example of how we may be seeing how recovery is playing a role, right? So recovery works in different ways. So what a lot of people need to understand is arm health kind of works in different ways. So for some guys, they could be really good on one day, and the problem is they cannot recover to get themselves back to 100% in time for the next time they have to go perform. Now, whenever that next time is different for everybody, right? So for example, we had somebody in here last night that threw a couple innings in relief, might have thrown 24 pitches. So by league rule, he can go back out and pitch again, right? So he's got to be ready to go by the next day, or if he's not used the next day, maybe 2 days later. The key question is, will he be able to recover to get back to where he needs to be for the next start? And that's what we talk about when we're talking about recovery. So there are quite a few pitchers out there that if you gave them 2 or 3 weeks rest and gave them 2 or 3 weeks time to prepare for that one outing, they might do really good. But there's plenty of pitchers out there when they have to come back and get back to that same level of performance again, whether it's on 2 days rest, 4 days rest, 6 days rest, they don't perform quite as well. And those are signs that your pitcher very specifically has a recovery problem. There's a recovery issue. So one way to test that in terms of arm health is, as we've talked about in previous parts of the arm health series, is one way to test this is he, number one, is he getting enough rest in between starts? And we did talk about in previous parts of the arm health series about the importance of recovery. Now, one of the things that we talk about with our recovery rules is for every one pitcher throws, we would like him to have 1 hour of rest. So if a guy threw 24 pitches, he's going to get 24 hours of rest. You could look at that in our earlier parts of our arm health series. So in other words, is he getting ample amount of rest before he goes back out again, or are we bringing this guy back on too short of rest, which is also impacting his ability to get back to 100% before he throws again, which is the recovery process, right? The second thing is, and we've talked about in previous arm health series, is especially the younger players, they're often going to go play another position after they've pitched. So, for example, I may pitch only 3 innings and I threw only 42 pitches, and everybody's going to say, great, we're keeping him to his pitch count, we got all bases covered. But the thing that we're missing is then he went and played shortstop in a doubleheader on a weekend tournament the day after he pitched, and then, oh, by the way, we're going to bring him back to pitch on Sunday. And boy, he just wasn't the same guy on Sunday. Well, that's another example of there is recovery issues. Now, one of the things that many people, excluding the experts in the world, agree on, and when I talk about the expert and talk about the doctors, one of the things that they talk about is rest and recovery may be the biggest contributor to arm pain, arm injuries. So, in other words, a lack of rest and recovery. Now, even for some players who get the ample amount of rest and recovery, they still have trouble bouncing back, and that becomes an issue. So If that still becomes an issue, the first thing I want to make sure is make sure you understand with rest and recovery, make sure he's getting the proper rest and recovery. We talked about an hour of rest for every pitch. I would say is that's a minimum. The second thing is, what is he doing in between pitching? So if he's got an entire good recovery routine program, or is he going to play shortstop, third base? Is he doing a lot of other throwing outside of pitching? Consider that. And then the next part is consider what is his routine in order to get ready for the next start. So maybe it's a high school pitcher that just simply is pretty much pitching on, say, Fridays, right? He pitches on Fridays. He's going to get almost a whole week. He's going to pitch again. Maybe he throws somewhere between 85 and 95 pitches. How can he get back? Well, one of the things that we look at in terms of recovery is what that player is doing. So one of the things that we're not big fans here at Fastball USA is immediately going to ice. That's really a big thing that gets talked about is, okay, you got to go ice and get ready for recovery. We view that as very likely slowing down the recovery process. Now, why is that? We believe blood flow is really important. So blood flow and getting the blood flowing back into the arm is a critical component to recovery. So when we look at our guys' recovery routines, we do look at what that player is doing post-game in his recovery, and we also look at the next day and a couple days after he throws as a critical time to get blood flow back in the body and also blood flow very specifically back in the arm. Now, there's many ways to do that, and in a future arm care part, we're actually going to cover a lot of those routines. But I want you to start thinking in terms of activity, because activity could be as simple as the next day I'm going to run some sprints, right? I'm going to run a sprint and walk back, get back in recovery, run a sprint, walk back. That could be part of recovery. There's many things to get the. It could be light-weighted ball throwing. It could be there's a lot of tools that we use to get blood flow back in the arm to make sure the recovery is good. The bottom line is we don't want guys shutting it down completely the day after they've thrown. We want activity going on. We want the arm to be kind of, we don't want to beat it up, but we want to be able to be active. So just to kind of give you a hint, some of the things that we will be covering, we use things like the shoulder tube, the DuraThrow sock, the DuraThrow throwing sock, the shoulder sphere. We do a series of arm care exercises that require absolutely no equipment, right? But the bottom line is, am I getting blood flow back into my body, very specifically into my arm? That way I can get myself back and ready quicker. So we believe a lack of blood flow is what actually delays the recovery time. So soreness turns into stiffness, and then stiffness, we just don't feel really good by the time we throw again. Now, every pitcher is different. There's some pitchers that will be very adamant about playing light catch, for example, the day after they've pitched. There are others that don't like to throw, but they like to increase their workout. The bottom line is we try to find what works best for each pitcher in order to get them back to 100% the next time. So I think for the most part, for most guys, it's I don't want to say it's easy, but it's different to be ready for a start or ready for a relief appearance when they've had ample time to get ready. What changes everything is when you're used and you have to go to perform, and then you got to go back and perform again, and then you got to perform again. That's where we start to see where maybe a guy recovers to the point where he's not hurt, but he's recovering to the point where he's not 100%. His arm feels maybe 90, 95%, and he's not quite there to get back to 100%, and it just takes him longer to get back to where he needs to be. And I think everybody would agree, if you're looking at, sort of example, on the radar, and you're a guy that you're concerned about your radar numbers and you want to throw harder, if you're not recovering well, those radar numbers are going to go down. And that is one way to monitor it, right? So you can monitor, okay, my velocity on this day, here was my average, here was my high. Now I noticed on this day it was a little bit lower. And oftentimes it's going to continue to drop if your recovery doesn't work. So I think one test of that could be, a way to think about this is if you tested this out and say you threw a 20 to 24 pitch bullpen on one day. And when I say a bullpen, like a game-like bullpen, or if you threw 20 to 24 pitches in a game. A question I would have to ask for any pitcher out there, what would be the likelihood if you threw about 20 to 24 high intensity pitches in a bullpen or in a game that you could come back the very next day and throw another 20 to 24 at the same intensity, the same performance level, same velocity as you did the day before? If you're thinking to yourself, chances are very low that I could match and feel that good the next day, feel good, I think then we've got a recovery issue, right? That's one way to look at it. Is it like, how could I bounce back on a shorter workload and just high intensity for 2024 and then come back the next day and do it again? If you don't feel like you could do that, then you're probably looking like you've got a recovery issue. And remember, if you're going to throw good, the arm has to feel good. So what you're doing from the moment that you've thrown your last pitch in the last game till you throw the next pitch, as soon as you've thrown that last pitch in that last game, your recovery process has to start and get ready for the next day. I think famous words of Roger Clemens at one point in time, he said the hardest or the easiest day in his pitching cycle was the day he pitched, and alluding to how hard he worked in between to get ready for that start. Roger Clemens was notable for the amount of time he spent after he was done pitching. He would immediately go into his recovery routine even before that game was over. So the amount of work these guys put in preparation and getting ready for the next start is very advanced. And for the younger guys out there, whether you're a youth player, you're a high school player, I want you to get in tune with, okay, if you feel like, yeah, my arm usually feels good, but usually if I've pitched, one time, two times, three times, then I don't start to feel it, then we're pointing at arm recovery issues, and recovery is critical. So what we're going to be looking at in a future arm health series part is we're going to be looking at what type of recovery exercises can you be doing. And I would start with this. The one thing obvious I would start with is get blood flow going back in the body and back in the arm as quickly as possible without overdoing anything to the arm, but blood flow more than stopping the blood flow. So once again, we have not been a big fan of ice. I know there's big proponents for ice, and there's big proponents definitely against ice. I think ice, there's certain times where ice would make sense. I believe in most cases it's about getting blood flow back in the arm and getting the pitcher ready to go so he can be ready and 100% quicker than he would normally would be. If you have any questions on this, shoot me an email, fastballusa@hotmail.com, or check out our website, fastballusa.com. But shoot me an email if you have any questions about this or any comments, and we can go from there. Again, this is Mike Ryan from Fastball USA.